The Cockatrice Boys by Joan Aiken, Chapter 6. When Sana woke, she knew that a lot of time must have passed. Days, perhaps. Days and days, even. In some indefinable way, she felt older. Her head ached, her mouth tasted dry and queer, and there was a sweet, strong, unpleasant smell in her nostrils, like the smell of the white powder Auntie Floss used to sprinkle to keep away moths and mice. Somebody had been dreaming, a long, sad, complicated dream, and somebody had been crying bitterly over what had been said in the dream. After much pondering, she realized the person who had been crying was herself. But I can't remember who said what, she thought, only that it was someone I knew very, very well, and that it was heartbreakingly sad. Breathing was difficult, and it seemed anything was out of the question, because her head was wrapped in a thick cloth, and her hands were tied tightly together, and she felt sick, partly because of the heavy, stuffy cloth with its disgusting smell, partly because of the motion. Jog, jog, jiggle, joggle, joggle. I can't be on the train, she thought. The train runs smoothly. You just feel it vibrate. Could I possibly be on a ship? What happened? Over and over, painfully, she sent her memory back. It was like sending a lazy child to school. She remembered the train slowing down because of the missing track, and Mrs. Churt making pints of blackberry tea. Then what? Memory, like the train, slowed down and came to a stop. Her hands fought against the cords that tied them. She arched her wrists and pulled, and bent her little fingers backwards to push and scrabble, poke and rub at the rope, trying to stretch and loosen it. She would have pushed with her thumbs, which were stronger, but they were too short to be any use, and besides, they bent inwards, not outwards. But slowly, slowly, she did begin to feel the cords give a little. Sana's fingers and wrists were very strong, from all the chopping and shredding she had done in the galley with Mrs. Churt, all the grinding and churning and grating and kneading and pounding of dough. She worked away at the cords. It was all she could do. But still it was a slow and discouraging business. When she grew tired, she tried to push the cloth away from her face with her tired hands. That, too, was a painfully unrewarding job. But she was at last successful in drawing in a sniff or two of air that did not reek quite so powerfully of moth and mouse powder. And a blink of gray light showed between the darkness. The snatched breath of sharp cold air made her more conscious of the rest of her body and its problems. First, her feet were freezing. They were completely numb, and for a long time she wondered seriously if they had been cut or burned off. But her thighs and knees were there. She could feel them. She was sitting uncomfortably on a broad, flat, hard seat, with her legs stuck out straight in front, leaning against a hard seat back, probably made of wood. Her elbows were pressed against hard objects on each side. A cold draft was blowing on her chest and shoulders. Slowly she became aware that she was listening to two voices conducting a kind of dialogue. She was unable to grasp what they said, and they spoke in some unknown language. One spoke much more than the other, an urgent, obstreperous, pleading gabble, on and on and on, like a kitten mewing or a baby crying to be fed. From time to time, not very often, the second voice would reply with one cold, drawling statement on a high note, like the clang of a ship's bell or the cry of a seabird. Then the other would start pleading again, gabble, 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 babble, babble. Can't that one see it's no use, thought Sana. She was reminded of how, long ago, she used to go to church service on Sundays with Mom and Dad, and some Sundays, not very often, thank goodness, there would be something they called the litany. She had never liked it. It made her feel unhappy inside, because it seemed to go on, asking, and there never seemed to be any answer to all those pleading requests. You shouldn't need to ask for something like that, thought Sana. It was the same with the two voices that drifted back to her, alternately louder and softer on the fitful wind. If they go on clattering at each other for long enough, perhaps I shall begin to understand what they say. Listening to them made some distraction from her sufferings, but not much. She was very miserable indeed in many different ways. She was cold, her head ached. She needed to relieve herself. She was hungry and queasy. She was puzzled, worried about how she was ever to find her way back to the Cockatrice Bell, and she was also much troubled in her mind about Aiken. He seemed almost bad-tempered, almost hostile the last few times she had spoken to him, and that was not like Aiken at all. What could be the matter with him? Several things now happened at the same time. The two voices rose up to a climax, For a moment it seemed to Sana that she understood the meaning of what they were saying to each other, although the words remained unfamiliar, but the message was unmistakable. "Take me with you, master, take me with you." "No. I beg you, I beseech you, I have served you faithfully, I have obeyed your orders, take me with you." "No." Do not leave me here alone, I can't endure it, take me with you, I beg you." "No." Pushing, straining, while the voices were so occupied with one another, Sana finally managed to shove the cloth wrapping off her face and down around her neck. If she had not been so utterly frozen, hungry, and exhausted, she might have let out some kind of gasp, and the course of events might have gone very differently, but she remained totally silent in a paralysis of cold and shock. The first thing she noticed was the light. It was dusk, the strange, pinkish, luminous afterglow that sometimes follows sunset. She was in a horse-drawn carriage, traveling fast along a road that ran to the bottom of a valley between high hills. The hills, thickly wooded, were dark indigo blue, almost black against the lustrous, pearly glow of the sky. The sound of a river could be heard very loud close at hand, rushing among rocks. In front of Sana were two figures, the driver of the carriage and another seated beside him. They could only be distinguished as shapeless lumps of darkness in the fast-fading light. Were there two indeed? Sana could not be certain. Sometimes there seemed to be just one, but there were certainly two voices. Now the cold voice gave a direction, an order. This must have meant go left, for the horses slowed and turned, proceeding more slowly and gingerly up a rougher, narrower track. Here they were in almost complete dark, under heavy overarching trees, and the hillsides grew together into a gorge. Sana, having freed her head, began to wrestle with greater confidence to loosen the cords round her wrists. Just a few minutes more, and perhaps I'll have them free, she thought hopefully. And then what? Would it be possible to open the carriage door and throw herself out? Would she break her legs? Would the driver and his companion hear her? The sound of water was still very loud. There must be a waterfall crashing down from a height somewhere close by. The carriage was not moving very quickly, but then it drew to a stop, slewing off the track onto a flat area, perhaps a quarry, at the side of the road. The two voices spoke again, a strange, brief order from the cold, distant one, more wild and anguished expostulation from the other. "Lord, don't leave me, take me with you." "No." I beg you, master." "Obey me." Instead of trying to escape, Sana could not help listening intently. Who were they? What could they possibly mean? So she missed her chance. The door opened. She was dragged from the place and thrown roughly on the hard, rocky ground. She hit her head and lost consciousness for the second time, but before she did, she heard a last agonized, wailing prayer. "Do not desert me, master." Then silence. And we will pause there.